Welcome to Beyond Graves and Stars, the horror and sci-fi movie podcast that looks into franchises, compares original classics to their remakes, and much more. This episode, I take a look into the world of J-horror. Although I'm a fan of the more well-known movies like The Grudge and The Ring, my knowledge on these films isn't great. When regular guest Adam Whybray suggested we take a look at the Tomie movies, my first thought was, well, I haven't heard of them. Don't even know if I can pronounce them. When I read it, I thought it said Tomie. I figured this could be interesting, so I told him, why not? Adam and myself watched the first of the 9 movies based on the Japanese manga. This podcast is the conversation we had straight after watching the movie. Here's the trailer. Obviously, it's not in English, but you'll get the vibe of the movie.
会いたかったよ、月子。
恐ろしく美しくて、出会った男たちが彼女の虜になって例外なく狂っていく。殺してもバラバラにしても
変わらないわね、月子。私嬉しいよ。
Thank you for joining me, Adam.
Hoi hoi.
Hey, welcome back. How you been?
I've been really lurgy, to be honest. In the last month, I've been working with little kids, doing teacher subbing, and little kids tend to be snotty, and so I've been pretty ill over the last month, basically just chest infections and the like. But I'm okay. Happy to finally watch Tomie. Or Tomie, as we're probably going to say.
I reckon I'll end up saying Tomie, and I keep thinking of Tomie's My First Computer and things like that. Do you remember these?
What?
It was like a...
Oh! What, those Japanese, like, wind-up?
It was like basic 80s toys.
Yeah, no, I think I had one... Maybe I think I had a few actually, like one with little water jets. You had to press a button to keep hoops. It was like hoop.
Oh, no, you mean
plastic hoops in the.
Well, they called that because there was like a real basic kids computer.
Yeah.
Not water based, just a computer.
Well, I think there were various. I think as a toy manufacturer. So I think I had a bit of like a sort of wind up, a bit steampunk really, a kind of wind up pretend computer.
Yeah. So that's what I'll be thinking of.
Okay.
But. This movie was released in 98, was it? 99?
Yeah, I think 98, 99. I mean, really, the kind of...
98.
Yeah, right at the start of, I guess, the early peak of the J horror boom. So around the same time, we've got Ringu, right? We've got Pulse, Audition is 99. So I guess this is around the time that in the West we started, getting Japanese films on video and then DVD that people started watching, say on Tartan Asia Extreme and things like that.
Yeah, and this is one that totally passed me by.
I think it's passed a lot of people outside Japan by. My understanding is these are pretty well known in Japan.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because Junji Ito, who is the creator of the Tomie series, so he didn't write the screenplay, but he created the character, and these are very loosely based on his horror manga, is definitely, easily the best known horror manga writer, artist, in this country now, to the degree that a lot of teenagers seem to be aware of him, or have stuff with his art on, like teaching in schools. I've noticed a massive popularity, and actually there was recently an Adult Swim adaptation of Uzumaki, which The Spiral, which is one of his most famous sort of long form manga. And Tomie has been, I read these comics, I don't know, maybe 15 years ago, over a decade ago at least. And when he started being able, Viz Media started collecting them and putting them out over here in translation. And there are loads of these now. Waterstones, there's loads of Junji Ito. But for a while, the ones you could get were Gaio, Uzumaki, and Tomie. And she's like his sort of first creation. So he was working as a dental assistant and writing sort of horror comics on the side, and was a big fan of probably my favourite horror manga artist, Umezu. And I think we previously discussed an adaptation of one of his manga, The Drifting Classroom.
Oh, of course, on my Vault of Cult.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, okay, yeah.
So Umezu did Drifting Classroom, and he's, I guess, he died a couple of years ago, maybe last year or the year before, but he's, I guess, one generation older than Ito, and Ito was a massive Umezu fan since childhood, and when he found that he could sort of submit to this horror manga anthology, I guess, this publication that he was sort of editing, that he started doing his own submissions, and that's where Tomie comes from. So from the sort of late 80s is his first creation, and he comes back to her as a character or a monster throughout his career, and she's basically, we can discuss how potentially problematic it is, but basically she is a perpetually 18-year-old high school girl who infatuates all boys and all men who ever meet her, to the point of driving them, or one of them eventually, to murder her, at which point she regenerates. So if any part of her survives, like an eyeball or some hair or a body part, it doesn't matter how many pieces she's cut up into, she'll always come back, and she's been with us through the generations. So some people have said this character basically embodies Ito's fear of women in a character.
So firstly, you read the manga 15 years ago. Why is it taking you so long to watch the film?
I think it was hard to get hold of for a long time. I mean, I think I was also a little bit sniffy, so I've seen the live action version of Uzumaki, which would have come out a few years, I think it's early 2000s, I think. It's around the same time as this, maybe a little bit later. And the thing with Junji Ito's manga is it doesn't adapt very well to anime, interestingly, quite notoriously, because there have been quite a few attempts at this point. A lot of people like the first episode of the new Uzumaki anime, and then it really goes downhill fast. The animation, I don't know if the budget fell away or they just spent it all on the first episode, but he has this very kind of dense, inky style. It's a bit looser with his early work, but it tends to be really detailed, and he loves splash pages, so like full page panels of when like a specific horror, a moment of body horror happens. And I thought about this quite a lot, like why his comics, like, he's like the Japanese Stephen King. He's prolific, he's very, very popular, and he's got loads of great horror ideas, and he can seemingly churn it out. And also, he's got the technical know-how as well. And yet, they don't suit anime adaptation very well. And I think it's because there's this odd stillness in Junji Ito. I think where a lot of the horror comes from, apart from just the gruey ideas of, there's spirals that are sucking people into them and people's bodies are becoming spirals, or, there's a monster girl who eternally regenerates. It has these slightly sort of schlocky horror ideas. But I think where his horror comes from, where it's most effective, is this contrast between the body horror, which is actually quite limited, surprisingly, in this first Tomie film. It's actually quite subtle compared to what's on the page often, which can be quite bloody, and then the stillness. So it is in his manga, there's a real sense of just absolute stillness. There's a sort of eeriness and quietness to his work, which sort of stands in contrast to how grotesque a lot of it is. And for some reason, in anime, the anime adaptations always miss that stillness somehow. And it's like, once you put them into movement, doesn't work nearly as well. I don't quite know why. So I didn't really... The Uzumaki live action is a curio. I kind of like it. It's got a good soundtrack. It's got some slightly iffy CGI. Because it's of that period of horror of slightly iffy CGI. And so Tomie is not my favourite Junji Ito. I felt like they're probably a bit slashery, which, again, not always my favourite. They were hard to get hold of, so I never bothered.
I because that's totally passed me by. Some of when I looked at because I've got the Arrow Blu-ray, and looking at the cover, it didn't look familiar, but the original artwork's in there, which did look vaguely familiar.
Oh, interesting.
So maybe I'd seen it in a video shop, or it might have popped up on a streaming service before.
I don't know if I didn't check whether Tartan ever released any of them. I don't remember seeing any of these released by Tartan back in the day. Certainly, when I was first aware of, I was aware more of anime before I was aware, if I'm thinking about being a teenager, before I was aware of live action Japanese horror. I vaguely remember, the remake of the Ring, Gore Verbinski's remake coming out. I vaguely remember the Grudge remake coming out.
See, they for me, they were a big thing.
Yeah, because you're a little bit older, just a few years older.
And they were the sort of movies that we were going, groups of teenagers, Friday night, we'd go... That's our night out.
Yeah.
See these movies, and they were big sort of popcorn horrors. And I'd have seen, I imagine, the American versions first, and then went back.
Yeah, whereas for me, I think my memories of getting into Japanese culture broadly would be being a teenager and watching manga video releases. So Akira being a big one, obviously. Perfect Blue, and the trailers like Fist of the North Star and trailers like that.
So things like that were on late night Channel 4. I'd watch a lot of them. And one thing for me, whenever we always referred to them as manga back then. Because that was the video releases were called manga.
Well, it was Manga Video was the big distributor,
But the live action mangas had a real bad reputation. And I can remember, I like it now, but I can remember first watching the Guyver live action.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
And it just felt cheap. But they were trying to do too much on the budget. So when you first mentioned this, I was like, a live action manga. It might be very cheap and very just poorly made. Which I can't think of offhand some of the others, but I had seen some of these. And Manga released the British film Razorblade Smile as well.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
The DVD release of that was that. And that, I like that, but that's cheap. That's, so I don't know. With this, maybe it did have a video release. I just didn't notice.
But what's interesting is I think, so this is, I'm going to completely butcher his pronunciation here. So it's directed by Ataru Okawa. So it says he was the screenwriter of the Japanese horror Door, which isn't one I know.
No.
And to me, it feels much more in keeping with other J horror of the period, maybe Dark Water, something like that, than it does other manga adaptation. It's pretty low key. There are some moments of a little bit of splatter and a couple of gross out moments, but largely, it's very much that Japanese horror of dark shadows and sort of weird electronic ambient noises in the background and creepy ambience.
Creepy is the word I was thinking all the way through it. And also the gore isn't, there is some, and I think it's well paced in between the bits, but the characters in it are sort of 18 to 20, it says.
Yes.
And I think it is aimed at a teen audience, even though it's there is violence and there is sex in it as well.
Yeah, so there's a little bit of sort of relationship drama. I say the plot itself, I mean, most of the Tomie stories, and I think the manga, like a lot of horror manga, is very much aimed at teenagers.
Yeah.
And so the characters are teenagers. They're generally high schoolers, end of high school.
Yeah, going back to even Halloween and things like
Yeah,
that.
and so this is based around, now, I guess I would say Zukiko, but I think it's like Zukie. So I think Zukie is the closest I can do to how it is pronounced. So Zukie is a photography student. She's got a slightly louche, rather cool, but disinterested boyfriend. And she's also suffering from amnesia. That great horror film staple. Something awful has happened to her. She can't remember what it was, and she wants to know, with the help of a psychiatrist, a female psychiatrist, what happened to her. I think 3 years ago, and she was told she was in a car accident, but she thinks there's maybe something more to it. So we're following her going to psychiatry sessions, having hypnotherapy to kind of bring back her memories, hanging out with her boyfriend, and she also has two other female friends who don't seem to necessarily like her very much. It's interesting because she seems like a perfectly pleasant young woman.
Yeah. But
a lot of characters don't seem to like her. She's also quite lonely. Yeah. Interestingly,
I thought that was because she's a newcomer and she hasn't got her backstory, so to speak.
Yeah,
I remember it. So they just think she's weird, even though she is perfectly pleasant.
Yeah. And also downstairs, a new neighbour, also just finished high school, has moved in, who seems like a very strange loner. He has an eye patch, and I think the first thing we see of him is carrying what seems to be a head in a bag. The
very first scene, opening scene.
Yeah, and later a bit like the character in not Brain Dead, Basket Case. Is sort of crooning over, protectively over something in a box, which may well be this head, but talking kind of babyish noises to it and feeding it.
Yeah.
And tells it off for eating a bug.
Yeah.
So something strange is going on there. But actually, we've got this sort of wide cast of characters. We also meet a detective.
Yes.
We find out that the boyfriend works at a restaurant, and we meet his co-workers. We meet the landlord.
Yeah. There's a lot going on.
There is a surprising amount going on, but it has this very, considering on some level you could say, it's quite busy or overstuffed. It's quite slowly paced, and it has this odd sort of dreamlike atmosphere. One thing I think it does manage is it gets that stillness from Junji Ito right, which I don't think other adaptations of his work I've seen have got right. That it does feel like everyone's in a slight trance.
Yeah.
Almost.
Yeah, and you sort of skimmed through the characters there. Now, a lot of the characters I found, like the cop, the psychiatrist, kind of stereotypes.
Yeah,
but it works, and they're all likable, often relatable, and it's like I said during the film that in movies the cop or detective is just detective. They never seem to have an outside life.
Yeah.
And that is what he does in this. He's just obsessed with what's happening. But in a way, he is the audience.
So, I guess he is the closest to the audience.
So for me, that really worked. That he sort of takes you through the story.
That is true to Junji Ito, I'd say. Like, Junji Ito isn't, compared to Stephen King, he's probably not so strong at character. He's great at ideas, Junji Ito, and he's great at execution in terms of his art, but he's I don't think he's that interested in characters. But he often has these sort of every girl characters, in fairness, that he often has female protagonists who are fairly ordinary. Sometimes maybe they have just moved to a new location, and that they're often a bit of an audience surrogate, basically, and then something creepy or scary happens to them. This idea of a scary neighbour, like someone mysterious in the upstairs from you or downstairs from you. It was up to something,
Yeah.
you know, strange and troubling. That's quite a Junji Ito trope. But yeah, I think considering the characters are archetypal, you're pretty invested in them. I think all the acting was really solid.
Yeah.
Actually.
It was. I say for me, it all worked, which is the when I read the synopsis, I thought it seems like it's gonna be quite a busy film.
Yeah.
It might get a bit confusing, but it wasn't. It all flowed very well, and 95-minute film, which I think's perfect for horror.
Yeah, I agree.
You know, you mentioned Stephen King. Some of his obviously he writes hefty books. You know, not manga, but big. Things like The Stand, which you couldn't put into a 90-minute film.
Yeah, some of them suit a mini-series. Yeah.
And they tried it with Dark Tower, and that failed miserably. And with this, it's the perfect length, and nothing. Strange you mentioned Stephen King, because early on in the film, when the young characters are going about on bikes, it reminded me of that sort of Stand By Me.
Yeah.
That sort of thing, which I suppose nowadays, not Stephen King, but people would relate it to Stranger Things.
Yeah, although I think it's quite Japanese trope as well. I mean, I mentioned the drifting classroom, and that's how the film The Drifting Classroom begins, is our protagonist on his bike, and I think it is often used as a kind of synecdoche, or like a sort of just a stand-in or a representation for like teenage wistful freedom. In Japanese cinema, is like a teenager on their bike on a sunny summer afternoon.
Can I just get in as well that I've got friends who, when I watch films with them, will complain that our age, but a little bit older than you, that most films, especially horrors, or a lot of them, always focus around teenagers, and she finds that annoying.
Okay.
Whereas for me, I think that is the perfect age for a horror film, or any film, because when you're that bit younger, a preteen, you kind of want to be a teenager because it seems cool. And then when you are a teenager, obviously you can relate to it. And when you get post that age, I certainly feel nostalgic for being that age. So I think that is a great age for all audiences.
Yeah.
Whereas a youngster might not want to watch a horror film or a comedy based around someone in their 50s.
I think with horror as well, it's like teenagers are old enough to be independent to a degree.
Yeah.
Anyway, but they're still young enough to be vulnerable, right?
Yeah,
I think that's probably partly why.
And the
it's
naivety
an
of
effective
them.
age. And also, like, in terms of relationship drama, of which there's a bit going on here, you've still got those sort of hypercharged emotions. You haven't got that kind of, ennui of people in their 30s. People have kind of either settled down quite happily, or people are kind of jaded, right?
Yeah. And they've got energy.
Yeah.
It's not like I talk about the detective. His life is just being a detective. Now, if the protagonist was like, obsessed with things like, I've got to stop and have a nap, and then
you don't want characters moaning about how much their back aches.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Right.
So for me that works anyway, and that's something that Stephen King certainly uses, and a lot of more modern successful horror films. Look at this era.
I mean, I in a way I prefer. So one thing it's funny because I only really got into horror. I guess I loved horror books as a kid. I loved Goosebumps.
Yeah.
And so the 90s really was, I guess, peak children's horror. And my podcast, Still Scared, is on children's horror because it made such an impact on me. And a lot of the kids' TV in the 90s, it was horror adjacent, like The Demon Headmaster, for instance. And then I read like Christopher Pike, who was a bit of a kind of Stephen King for younger teenagers, I guess. But I only really got into horror films year 11 and sixth form because the stuff that was popular in the cinema when I was young was very much off the back of Saw.
Yeah.
And it was that kind of torture porn, and to me it seemed so nasty and so unpleasant.
Yeah.
I really wasn't I didn't want to see Hostel when that came out. I think I was just about old enough, and it all seemed really nasty and cynical. And it was only really when I discovered, like, I guess David Cronenberg and David Lynch, that actually I was like, whoa, there's really interesting stuff. And that's when I started watching more 70s horror and, fell in love with the genre.
This is where I find these few years around our age, they're different, but there's a comparison. So for me, it was films like The Craft and Scream and I Know You Did Last Summer, which were more fun than the Saws and Hostel. But they made me go back to, I'd already seen Halloween, I watched that. But then there was a lot of the slasher films from the 70s, Black Christmas and things like that. So it is that, things go in cycles, and then you go back as a horror fan. And around this time, as well as, J-horror getting big, it was sort of post-Scream and everything, just before... I'm going to refer to it as Saw and stuff, because a lot of my podcasts I've used words that I think have stopped people listening.
Oh, I see,
especially the one I've done on Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer. But anyway, with this one, it is the supernatural thing as well. Came with Sixth Sense in '99 as well, around the same time. It was another. What I like about this on the first watch is you've got. You mentioned it has got a bit of a slasher element.
Yeah,
it's got the supernatural element. It's got the monster character, so it's got a lot of different things.
It has got a lot of different generic elements, and obviously the kind of figure of the ghost, possibly sort of supernatural, kind of dark-haired Japanese woman is a sort of perennial Japanese horror trope that goes back to medieval stories even, and woodcuttings. And Tomie clearly is meant to have been around since like the late medieval Japanese period, and in some ways I think is meant to be like an archetype, like an embodiment. Okay, I guess you could say an embodiment of this sort of misogynist idea that she's the embodiment of the woman who drives men mad, and there is an element of that, definitely. But to me, and this is where I think it does succeed, and I think even more, maybe interestingly, in the film than in the comics, though it's there in the comics. I don't know why, I find Tomie kind of likeable. I don't think I should, but I kind of like her. The men who fall under her thrall always seem like idiots, and I think they're meant to. They always just seem to be these really kind of toxic... I don't know, they're pathetic. You get these men and they sort of desperately say, "Oh, don't leave me, Tomie." They look really wretched, and they're very easily manipulated. Basically, they're often kind of stupid, and whereas Tomie has quite a lot of fun being evil. Like she often cackles. There's a lot of Tomie going, "Oh, ho, 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 ho." And even though she clearly is a monster, and one of the main threads, interestingly, in this film is she's very upset that what turns out to be a former best friend called her a monster, and Tomie doesn't like that, even though she knows she definitely knows that she is a monster, and she reflects on the fact that she's a monster, but she's quite upset at being called out for being a monster. But she also clearly has a lot of fun being a monster.
Well, there's 8 sequels to this, or 8 other films, because there's prequel as well, at least one prequel. I haven't really looked much into it, I'm going to. But for the character to work, going back to, one of my favourites, Nightmare on Elm Street. Same with that.
Freddy has fun.
Yeah, he has fun, and in a way, even though you shouldn't, you should like the character. I mean, going back to the 60s with Psycho, Norman Bates was a very
likeable about him.
That's why I really like Psycho too, because you see that there could be a good guy, and then he's trying to. It's like with a lot of characters, there's a good guy and there's the bad guy trying to creep out. Whereas with Norman Bates, he's the bad guy with the good guy. Do you know what I mean?
No, I know what you mean. I think Tomie, I don't think it's so much that there's any goodness in her. I think it's that teenage girls get a bad deal of it generally, and that. I think it's like Tomie. There is something of the avenging angel to her. Well, she normally she doesn't always, but she does normally target guys 90% of the time.
The boyfriend in this, he's cheating. He
seems like a kind of jerk.
So that's why you're not too bothered. And that works for it. Definitely works for it. And obviously there's tragic moments in the film. But she is evil.
She is evil. Tomie is definitely evil, in fairness.
But to carry a movie, there's got to be these elements of so many people are going to die that it kind of helps that the people she's going for are often just assholes.
Or just like I think maybe particularly this is like they kind of are, but it's also like they're just kind of not very self-aware and slightly like the guys who are working at the restaurant.
Yeah.
Right, they're all kind of lazing around. And
They're very
having
90s
banter.
teenagers.
Yeah, they're these 90s teenage guys. They're kind of annoying.
Yeah, which happens in the slasher movie.
yeah, I guess that is a very slasher trope.
There's always the one who thinks he's funny.
Like the guy on the kazoo in this one.
Yeah, and I was just like, I hope he dies. And and I think that works for the audience so well that there's so much I liked about this film.
Yeah,
and for things like that, I'm surprised that I hadn't heard of it. But then we mentioned things like The Grudge, Dark Water, Ring. All of them have had American remakes, whereas this hasn't, to my knowledge.
Yeah, that is interesting.
So that might be, if there was an American remake of it, it might have got people into it in this country.
Yeah, it is sort of surprising that it didn't have a remake in a way, because you can easily imagine an American remake of this one.
Winona Ryder in it or something.
Yeah, no, totally. Yeah.
So I'm surprised there hasn't been, but there might be a reason for it. They might not have wanted to, the writers and stuff.
I'm not sure.
But as well, I think that for me that makes it a bit more special that there isn't a comparison. I'd certainly watch it if there was a remake.
It'd be very interesting, and I never say never. Junji Ito is more popular than ever in this country, I would say. I still can't quite get used to how popular manga is now. I find it so weird because I remember, it was only really me and a few of my friends at school who were interested at all, and my late best friend, he got bullied quite a lot for his love of manga and anime at school, and now it's so mainstream. Teaching at school with so many kids, like Demon Hunters, for instance. Demon Slayers. Demon Slayers.
All you got to do is look at cinema listings. There's usually at least one anime on it.
Well, Chainsaw Man got a big release. It was in the Chainsaw Man movie was in all the main cinemas.
There's usually one. There's usually one on at a point, whether it be a film or they often group together episodes at the beginning or the end of a series. And it always does well, And I do find with anime that it is a thing of people are either obsessed with it or couldn't care less. There doesn't seem many. That's
probably true, actually. I guess people get really hung up on a series, and some series run on for a very long time. My brother, I think, is now completely up to date with One Piece, and One Piece is over 1,000 episodes.
Well, this is what puts me off it. Even look around my flat. There's a Ghost in the Shell poster up and a Name poster up, but in amongst all the horror stuff and everything, I do like it. But I'm one for if there's a movie.
And you're more of a film watcher than a TV watcher, which I am too.
But there's so much. I can remember watching on TV on Channel 4 as a kid. There was a series called Legend of the Four Kings.
Okay.
And it's kind of forgotten now.
Yeah.
But I loved it. But it just went on and on and on. And I was like, I'd watch an episode. And this is at the age of sort of 13, 14, and I'd think, the story hasn't progressed. I've just watched half an hour, and I don't feel that they needed to do, you know what I mean? But I get it, because people love it, so that's put as much out as possible. And that's tell the story in a complete way.
Yeah.
I love Ghost in the Shell, and even that has got the spin-off series. There's loads of sequels now, but I tend to see that one as a standalone in my mind.
One thing I like about Junji Ito in terms of his manga, and I guess I read a lot of them as scans online with fan translations before they had official English translations. I've bought more since and read more officially, from the library or in what. Well, I'm terrible for sitting in Waterstones. God, I am when it comes to bookshops. I really am. I probably helped put Borders out of business. I remember as a student in York, the York Borders was really comfy, the chairs, and I would spend a weekend.
To be honest, some bookshops are asking for it because they put coffee shops in them.
But anyway, one of the nice things about Junji Ito is so many of his stories are standalones, and they do work like little short stories or a series of short stories with the same characters. So you really can just read one in 20 minutes. And for me, I really enjoy that. So I've read probably most of his stuff, partly because it's not like, oh God, there's 80 volumes of this series with the same characters. I'm not going to I feel intimidated.
So with this, obviously you read it and it was a while ago.
Yeah.
Is because you said it was short stories.
Yes.
So is this? Did you recognise it from the? Or was it
Not
just,
really. I recognise ideas. I recognise the idea of Tomie being a girl at a school and various male classmates become obsessed with her and eventually one of them murders her, for instance. You know, that's something that crops up in Tomie. Tomie having a weird affinity with bugs. There weren't any centipedes in this, interestingly, because she likes centipedes. But Tomie being associated with like cockroaches, bugs, centipedes is again a common thing in the Tomie stories, which cropped up here. So there are certain images, certain ideas, no characters apart from her specifically to memory. Generally, the way that the stories work is it will be another a new male character has become obsessed with her and is trying to kind of serve her in one new way or another. So in one, I remember there's an artist who meets Tomie, and he starts doing these strange paintings of her that also reveal her monstrous nature and so on. So
the screenwriters have basically taken the character and written their own thing.
Yes, that's what I would say, and I'd be interested if we hopefully are able to get hold of any more of the films. It'd be interesting to see whether any more of them are direct adaptations of specific stories or whether they just sort of riff on it.
I've got to do my homework and
because
I bought there's the complete hardback of them all.
Yes, yeah,
and I've got that, and I was like, should I read it before? But then. Firstly, this year I've been really lazy with any type of reading, but I thought no, because this is a film podcast, so I'll watch the film first because I didn't want to. If I loved the manga, it might take it away. So now I've watched the first film, I can go.
I'm quite glad that it was a while, but also I do think the Tomie stories are sketchier than with Uzumaki. Uzumaki does have a proper long-form plot, although it's still pretty episodic. It still really is one thing after another. But it's all tied together, whereas I think the nature of Tomie as a character, which is that once she's killed, she gets to regenerate, and she regenerates through the ages, means that essentially you can, they can essentially be standalone stories with the same monster.
And you could set it in any time. You could do anything with it.
Yeah, pretty much. She's very adaptable.
What I think it kind of reminds me of is the comics of the Crow. How it's the same thing with kind of different people die, but the Crow takes them on, and then so you can do anything with that character. And also, movie wise, with the time narrative, something like Highlander. You can put that Highlander character in anything because he's an immortal.
I mean, I think we have the same performer playing Tomie, so it's Miho Kano, also from the film Dolls, actually, Japanese film which I've owned on DVD for years and never got around to.
Join the club for that.
Yeah, and she's great as Tomie.
So does she play her in all the films?
I think she plays her in more than just this one. That's what I've got the impression of.
Yeah.
I mean, you could have, she's archetypal. You could have different performers play her. But I quite like the idea of, like with, say, Freddy.
Yeah.
I think I prefer having one person playing Freddy than, say, with Jason. Yeah. Where lots of different actors have played him.
Yeah, it's just the fact they've made 9 of them. And I did read that the second one was a straight-to-video affair as well. Ooh. So I'm guessing that they have recast quite often.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
And I'm just looked at the actress and skimming through. I can't see that she did.
Oh, it must be a new Tomie who ends up.
Yeah. You might get one actress who became known for it, maybe. But
although Tomoro Taguchi, who played the detective, is in Tetsu. I did recognise his face. He's in Tetsu Iron Man.
Ah, okay, yeah.
Which is a terrific Japanese horror film.
Yeah. So I mean, the cast are all really good, I think. One thing I did want to add is when you first meet her, you don't see her face.
Not for quite a while.
Yeah, that is a nice. It's like the old creature reveal.
Yeah.
And then even to a point of there's a photo of her, and
it's scratched out, isn't it?
It's scratched out, but then you see another photo and it's blurred. There's something in the way.
Yeah.
But I think you have seen her face before that in the. But yeah, I thought it was a really well crafted film. But saying all that, all the praise, yeah, I can remember when I first watched Ring. Yeah,
Yeah.
that sort of blew me away. I didn't get that from this.
No, I wonder. One thing it doesn't really have, interestingly, which I think other Japanese films like Pulse or like Ringu of the period have, is there's not much interest in technology in this, and a lot of films of that period, or Japanese horror films that I've seen of that period, are really interested in the idea of a contaminated technology, or the idea of a curse, and this curse often then uses, say, digital medium or video or something in order to infiltrate like the domestic space. And you don't really have that here. I do wonder if that sort of stopped it being, because obviously as a viewer, why Ring is scary is that idea that you also see the evil videotape.
Yeah.
You see the same. Maybe you're cursed. Yeah. So there's that sense of lack of safety as a viewer, which I think Japanese horror of this period is very good at doing. Audition's very different, but again, I think the fact that the first half of Audition plays out as a slightly queasy, but okay, romantic comedy.
Yeah.
And then the second half, obviously, has torture and is quite disturbing. I think, again, it makes you feel very unsafe. Because you watch this film and you're like, where is this going? What?
Well, that's a film. I've only seen it once, right? And I bought a Blu-ray of it, and I did really like it, and I get the praise. Yeah. But I'd love to have seen it when it was shown at a film festival.
Without knowing what it was.
Yeah, and then it just takes that turn.
Yeah.
But even now, the video cover had the needles. And,
it's a shame, I think.
Yeah, and now you're just waiting for that.
Whereas I think with Tomie, and I did like it, and I think it's effectively creepy in this sort of strange, slightly sleepy way. It never made me feel unsafe in the way that some classic Japanese horror of the period does.
Yeah, and I think that's the monster element of it. Do you know what I mean? It's so unreal.
Maybe that's it. You know that this is about and it becomes obvious pretty early because you don't properly see her, but you get the sense that, okay, she's a head and she's growing back from a head, and she sort of starts off as a kind of baby head and then becomes a kind of young girl, and then she becomes eventually an 18-year-old. So we kind of know that she's this strange regenerating girl, and I guess...
Yeah, and know... That won't get under your skin because you're pretty sure that won't happen.
Yeah, not in the way that maybe the idea that you could watch something online or you could watch a video you don't know what it is and that curses you. I don't know. It's just as ridiculous, but maybe on some level that's scarier.
Yeah, and it felt. In the first instalment, it felt like a franchise film. Do you know what I mean?
That's interesting.
Did you feel that you could see it going else? Even the way it ends. Don't go too.
But there's a bit where it's like you think, oh, maybe she's been killed, and then oh no, she hasn't.
Well, the end's a bit Friday the 13th.
I thought it was a bit Jaws, but Jaws 2.
Jaws, the horror Jaws, the proper slasher one. But yeah, I mean. For me, this is perfect for this podcast.
Yeah.
I'm glad that you brought me something.
Yeah, well, that's what I was hoping.
And I'm certainly interested in doing more.
Yeah.
But it's a matter of, can we get hold of it?
Yeah, I hope so, because it would be really interesting. And I think for the podcast, it's nice. Yeah, don't get me wrong. It's great to do like Nightmare on Elm Street and the heavy hitters. Yeah. But it's also nice to do something that people are less likely to have seen.
That was the point of the podcast. Yeah. It was like, it took me a while to... even do Nightmare on Elm Street. I was debating it for a long time, but that was the one that a lot of people would ask me about, and there are, even today you've asked me about Halloween.
I love Halloween 3 Season of the Witch.
Well, that's Tom Atkins rules. So I'm sort of trying to do, as I said, I'm currently doing the Critters movies, which people know, but they weren't massive hits, were they? So it's sort of sneaking in different ones.
Yeah.
And next year I'm going to be doing the Friday the 13th films, but also hopefully we'll do more of these.
Yeah.
I'm going to be doing Hills Have Eyes. So really mixing it up.
Yeah.
But I think it is nice to, some people, I hate to say it, aren't interested in the smaller films.
It's true. Yeah.
So they want to hear about, or rewatch and then listen to something like Nightmare on Elm Street. But then other people don't want to listen to a podcast about Nightmare on Elm Street because there's so many of them.
Yeah.
So you've got
no, that's a very. I mean, listening to Evolution of Horror over the years, I've seen how Mike very carefully, I think, balances the heavy hitters with the more obscure stuff, and and I think being, the order you put things out, sequencing stuff cleverly goes a long way. I mean, with my podcast, I think I tend to just do whatever whim I have, or me and Red have, is like, because the last one, which you were listening to, was on Robert Swindles, who's a horror writer for kids, who was very popular in the 90s and now seems to be almost entirely forgotten. And I'm very aware that there's maybe the occasional person who'll happen to look up Robert Swindles on a podcast because they like him or remember him, and it'll be like our podcast that comes up. But I also know that realistically, doing children's horror, there are some ones we haven't done. We've not done a Hocus Pocus yet. That's silly. Like, there are a lot of heavy hitters that we haven't done just because we haven't fancied it.
Yeah, I mean, and I kind of do. I'll speak to people who come on, and I'll do what I can, and then I put them out, and then they're there. And you mentioned about the writer there. It's like we done Phantasm.
Oh I loved it.
I'm hoping that people, if they haven't seen Phantasm, they'll watch it and realise it's great, and then want to research, and then they'll look up, who's done a podcast on it? And then they can hear our take, and then hopefully I'll get comments a year down the line, 2 years down the line, of people who've just come to
and
it.
that does happen. That does happen. It's happened in my podcast that years later people have said, this I discovered. I remember on ours, it was a bit jokey in a way, but we did Pogle's Wood as cozy horror, and talked a bit about Oliver Postgate. Like, I've seen Bagpuss discussed as folk horror, which I think is ridiculous. Bagpuss is way too cute. But anyway, and then I had a comment by an American a few years back now, but saying that him and his wife, they discovered Oliver Postgate, because obviously in America they never had the clangers and Bagpuss.
Of course,
And so he was now enjoying all of that, and I thought that's really nice, because
I've had more people I know actually, but something like Trances, people I hadn't even heard of, and that's the one because we started with Candyman, and everyone knows Candyman, but a lot of people hadn't seen part 3. And I enjoy talking about that, and it's just there's so much stuff out there that sometimes it's overkill. So it's nice to sort of section things off. And even with this, the most I've done in a row was I've done all bar the remake of Nightmare on Elm Street, which hopefully I will do one day. But I've done but it was episode of that. Whereas now I think I'm going to mix them. I'm going to be doing this the same time as Critters and other things. And I threw in the random, and this is one I think you should listen to if you haven't, the Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer.
Well, I've always been scared to watch it. That's another one I had on DVD as a teenager, ended up giving to my brother, who's got a stronger stomach than me. So
the guests I had on that, they didn't particularly like it.
Oh, really?
And we spoke for a good hour and a half, and in a way, when I listened back, which I do sometimes do, I realised that because they didn't like it, I was talking more about the bits of it I didn't like.
Oh, interesting.
And I do like it, but I totally agreed with them because they had valid points. But now another listener who's been on the show was like, I felt you were all too negative about it. And I'm like, that's true, because you do, when you have that conversation, I don't want to argue with people.
But you had a mirroring the guests a bit.
And also they make me see their point, and sometimes I think I can do that when I've had people on who haven't enjoyed a film and I've enjoyed it a lot, that they'll focus on that. And often I like to, after I've done a film, spoken about it, then maybe a few months later, with that all in my head, then rewatch it, and then I can get a different thing of it. But we're doing the next one I'm doing with the Criminal Crack folks it's slightly different, and is it horror, is it sci-fi, I don't know, but we're doing Dark Crystal and Labyrinth just because we want to do something a bit more
we've done. I did those on my podcast. Done Dark Crystal, not Labyrinth, and I like Dark Crystal more than Labyrinth, which I think seems to be the unusual, not so common. But I did notice actually, we're always if we're recording upstairs, you have to picture that Andy, if you've never gone up to Andy's, has a lot of DVDs, sort of in piles of various heights. And I did see you've got Jim Henson's The Storyteller on Blu-ray.
One that I just wanted a better copy of it. I've got I've got the DVD. It's on. I think it's on Prime. But it's there's a new little featurette with Steve Barron, who directed that, who done Ninja Turtles and Coneheads, two classics. And but it's got the second series in the box as well. There's a Greek myths series too.
Yes.
So it's all there. And one of my favourite real life television dogs in that, just called Dog.
And I'm sure, that I've never properly seen it, and I'm sure the Henson Company's, the Creature Factory's special effects and animatronics are amazing.
It's really, for that time, and considering it's made for TV, it's great. I'm watching that alongside with the BBC's Narnia from a few years later, and the effects in the Henson one are miles above.
Well, I think they were really spearheading.
Yeah, bigger budget. But that's we should probably wrap it up. But overall, you're glad that
I'm glad we've watched it. Like, it's a fascinating little film. I think it was effectively creepy, and I'm intrigued. I hope we can get a hold of the other ones, because I'm intrigued to see what they do with them.
That's one thing that I'm glad I did notice before, is that one of them at least is a prequel. Yeah, and I'm hoping it goes the way of, like, Phantasm, where it's interesting different takes on it, opposed to just a rehash of and I mentioned The Crow, and I think that's where The Crow as a franchise went wrong. It was different characters, but the same things were happening too close to the original, and then they remade it badly. But so I'm interested to see what happens. Is there Tomie in space? That'd be cool. We'll see. So we'll see how it goes, see what we can find. I think we should try to do them in order.
We'll try.
But we'll do it over, who knows, this could take us a few years.
If we're having to source them,
But also that makes, when we done Phantasm, we done that over the space of about 7 months.
And it was nice, actually.
That's a good way to do it. It's nice to go back.
It was nice to look forward to them as well, actually.
So that was cool. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Andy.
You've mentioned your podcast.
Yes, Still Scared, talking children's horror. We're currently watching our way through and reading our way through, so we need to record on it soon, really. Chucky.
I remember that well.
There we go.
Can I tell you a quick story about Chucky?
Yeah.
Because obviously that's the invisible kid.
Yeah. Well, so sort of. So it's an alien child that our character is talking to in his head.
Okay, so
so he's sort of invisible in as much as he only exists in his thoughts.
Okay, because I remember it as a very, very vague, this kid. Now, I don't remember this, but when I was really young, apparently I got in the car, my parents were driving me somewhere, my mum was, and I just screamed, and she was like, "What's the matter?" And I told her that she'd shut Chucky in the door. So but that's one as well I've often looked online, because it has had DVD releases, the series, but obviously it's a book first, wasn't it?
A John Wyndham book. So same as the Midwich Cuckoos and the which obviously Village of the Damned is based on, and also Dare the Triffids.
Okay, so more than I didn't know that. So that's and Village of the Damned is one that I might tackle John Carpenter films at some point. There was a Christopher Reeve one with that. So I look forward to your Chucky episode.
Cheers.
And thank you very much.
Thanks, Andy.
Way. Huge thanks to Adam for joining me again. I really enjoyed that. I look forward to watching more of those movies and having more conversations. Obviously, check out the Still Scared podcast. Always a good listen. Regular listeners to the show will know I've started my look at the Critters franchise. Episode 1 is up. It won't be till next year now, that 2016, that I look into the sequels. But hopefully there'll be an episode up soon, or maybe 2 episodes up soon, on Christmas-based horror movies, and more information on that on our social media pages. News will go up soon. Thank you all very much for listening. Please rate and comment on the episodes. It's always good to talk, and those 5-star ratings really help spread the word, I am told. My name has been Andy Martin, and I'll be back for more Beyond Graves and Stars very soon.
Jem.
And I'm Victoria.
And we are childhood best friends with a true crime podcast called
The Criminal Crack. During each episode, one of us presents a true crime case to the other.
And the listener has no idea what the case will be.
So every reaction, question and twisted theory you hear is genuine and off the cuff.
So join us fortnightly on the platform of your choice.
And find us on Facebook, Instagram and TikTok by searching @The Criminal Crack.
Bye-bye!
Keep on tracking.